So good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Building Value from Collaborative Partnerships. I'm Heather Rattray, part of the marketing team at Interface, and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr Siobhán Jordan, our director at Interface, and Alistair Cameron, managing director of Scott Mass. So Alistair has worked with Interface for several years now, and today's event is really kind of a bit more of a fireside chat style between Siobhán and Alistair, just to kind of draw out some key themes and hear how the business has successfully navigated their academic collaborations over the past 10 or so years, how they've pivoted their business to respond to customer demands during the COVID pandemic, and also their plans for the future. So before I hand over to Siobhán, I just have some quick housekeeping to run through. Please use the chat functionality to post some observations or questions to our panel. Depending on how the questions are going, we may open up the mics. Hopefully the technology will work seamlessly for this. So if you do post a question, I might come to you directly to ask that to our speakers. Also, the webinar is being recorded and we will be hosting it online afterwards. So I will now hand over to Siobhán.
Thanks very much, Heather, and a very warm welcome to you all who have joined us this afternoon. I think Fireside Chat is a very apt title for it, and hope that you're all staying warm and dry on this street day. With over 2,000 companies matched to academic partners over the years, the Interface team really love catching up on what happened next. And today we're really delighted that I can get to catch up with Alistair Cameron, Managing Director of Scott Mass, who's based in the picturesque town of Kelso in the Scottish borders. Alistair, a very warm welcome to our event this afternoon. So maybe if we start off, could you explain a little bit about Scott Mass and your role in the business?
Sure, thanks, Siobhán. Well, first of all, it's a very picturesque day here in Kelso. Probably tipping down like everywhere else in the country, but it's certainly a very nice place to live and to work and to do business. Ours is a family business started by my father way the way back in 1989. And my father recently retired from the business, and we have 3 generations still involved within the business today. We specialise in water treatment, hygiene and environmental care products with a focus on high-end disinfection. So some of our most recent products or projects have been involved in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow with some of their well-publicised issues around water hygiene. Through to large projects in the offshore oil and gas industry and drinking water disinfection, both here in the UK and the Middle East. So we like to think of ourselves as a innovative, nimble company. Many of our competitors are global multinationals, and it's a requirement that we differentiate ourselves by the quality of our products and our responsiveness to the market.
So that's a great whistle-stop introduction to the business. And your role, Alistair, you said it was a family business. So how has that evolved between the 3 generations?
So I think there are, we have a staffing at the moment of 58. I think we have around 6 people within the business who have the surname Cameron. So I've been the MD of the business since 2011. Prior to that, I worked entirely on the technical side of the business in product development and responding to market demands. So our business is split into 3 operational sectors. One is large projects, which tends to be drinking water or large oil and gas projects, where we're working with consulting engineers on fairly large projects. We have a UK water services business, which takes on clients within generally the food industry and the healthcare sector. And those tend to be what we would call mission critical applications, where the slightest bug or problem in the water supply is going to have very large operational implications. And the third part of our business is an engineering business where we manufacture large pieces of equipment. A growing part of our business has been in consumer products. So there we are producing, in normal times, travel hygiene products. market for that hasn't been so great within the past 5 to 6 months, but we also are fortunate enough to have a number of disinfectants and personal care products within our range, including the ubiquitous hand gels. So that is certainly a part of the business that's seen a huge amount of change over the past 5 or 6 months.
Thanks, Alistair. We might come back to that later, but
Suspect you might.
Certainly apt to be talking about water on a day like today. So quite a broad range, from very large scale projects to actually working with direct to consumers. So and in mixed amongst all of that is the NHS and everybody in between. So are your main markets local, or are they global, or how do you manage all of that?
Our markets vary. So we have local markets here in Scotland, and global applications. One thing we're very good at here in Scotland is translating industry-specific problems into something generic and then reapplying that knowledge. So if I could take the example of some of the healthcare systems that we have monitoring hospitals here in Scotland, that was a technology originally developed on behalf of BP for deployment in onshore oil fields in Iraq. So we're very good at distilling a problem down into its components, developing a technology, and then reapplying that technology elsewhere. And again, that's what we see within the consumer products area. So some of the products we're now applying for disinfection in hospital wards and in the general population were originally developed for very high-end industrial applications.
So I really hear from what you're saying that you've got a long-standing track record within the business about innovation and doing things differently. And has that always been the case in the kind of family generation since you started in 1989?
Yes, we are unashamedly a techie business, but I think also there's an element that if you're a small player in going up against the big guys, you have to differentiate yourselves. People will always buy from the GEs, the Siemens, etc. of this world unless there's a compelling reason not to. So our instinct has always been to innovate and do something different because ultimately that's what helps us sell products and stay one step ahead in the marketplace.
And doing things differently involves, in some cases, working in partnership with academia. I can recall my first encounter was meeting your father. I think it was way back in 2007 or 2008, and there was certainly a kind of, I suppose, entrepreneurial spirit there. So, but some companies might think that actually working with academic partners, even considering collaborations, involves complexity. It might involve cost and delays. So, from ScotMath's perspective, what do you find adds value?
From our point of view, what we bring to the table is closeness to the market and to being able to translate the customer's problem into a technical problem, because very often clients know their pain points but don't know how to translate that into a solvable problem. We're very good at distilling things down and taking those to the academic or the entrepreneurial innovator world to look for solutions. And I think that is a key strength. What the academic side of things brings to it is obviously resources, both in terms of infrastructure and brain power that we can only dream of as an SME. And harnessing that power and knowing both the pluses and the minuses and knowing what to expect and what not to expect, I think is something that we've got quite good at over the past 10 years.
So, looking across, I think there's quite a few universities you've collaborated with across both Scotland and elsewhere, and you've kind of hinted at what to expect and what not to expect. So, if you were marking the homework and giving a report card, maybe you could explain what works well from your point of view, and maybe then leading on to what could be improved.
Sure. I think the start of a project is absolutely critical to set expectations very clearly at the outset. what the problem to be solved is, what we're looking for, etc. The academic world is very intense, but its motivations are different. It's very easy to be sidetracked by an academically interesting problem, but actually is not particularly commercially relevant for either ourselves or our clients. So when setting out a project, whether that's a small innovation voucher, a further voucher, or going onwards to a KTP or some of the larger interventions, even on contract research, it's very, very important to have a clear mind of the problem that you're setting out to solve. There are many advantageous byproducts that maybe can be considered towards the end of the project for opportunities for further research, but they have to be taken on their own merits.
So it's very much setting out the clarity at the beginning is your top tip.
Absolutely. And many, we have had successes and failures with academic collaborations, as indeed we've had successes and failures with commercial collaborations or internal product development. I would have to say that the batting average for academic collaborations is higher than the average, because the process and the discipline of working with an external partner actually causes internally and with our clients a much more structured approach to be taken, rather than an endless series of field trials or such that we might carry out under our own steam.
So that bodes well then for continuing your rich theme of working with academia in the future.
Indeed, we've just been fortunate enough to have a further innovation voucher with Robert Gordon University supported, and that's looking at really taking on some of the research that we've done both with Strathclyde University and Heriot Watt University in the past. So there's certainly a very strong theme of collaboration. I think one of the other things I can say about the collaborations with Interface is that we've used Interface very, very extensively as a sort of screening tool to see what academic knowledge is out there. But as you carry on the journey, you actually find that you build your own academic networks, and Interface sometimes doesn't get enough credit for making those initial introductions. Very often we're having those chats with academics offline, being pointed in the right direction, but those conversations would never have come around if we hadn't had that initial push and that initial matchmaking, as it were.
Well, thank you for that comment. We use the phrase the ripple effect, and it is hard to be able to, I guess, see the end of our ripples or the beginning or the start of the ripples that we make a difference. I know that there are some representatives from academic institutions on the online today. So if you'd certainly like to follow up on any of those points that Alistair's made about what works well and what could be improved, then please feel free to pose some questions to the man in the hot seat, and we can certainly draw you into the conversation. I suppose if you've kind of reflected on some of your collaborations, and you've talked about the fact that you have to invest as a small SME time and money and resources into that. So there must be a return on investment for the company, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. Maybe you could explain a kind of real case study almost of what one of those projects has meant in terms of a real outcome for the ScotMass Group.
Yes, so I think some of our initial projects that we carried out with respect to chlorine dioxide chemistry, which is our core material, we carried out an initial academic search via Interface, carried out an innovation voucher with Heriot Watt University. And that translated going forward onto a 2-year KTP with 2 students, which ultimately resulted in 1 patent being awarded and a PhD and MPhil accreditation for the academics concerned. So all told, that first innovation voucher, what would it be, a sort of 2-month type project, actually ended up being a 4-year interaction and a very long-term relationship with the university concerned. The ripple effect from that was that we placed 2 graduate apprentices with the university. So the collaboration has carried on far beyond that initial touch point. And a sort of lasting relationship has been built with the academics concerned.
And the outcomes for the business has kind of brought you new knowledge to be able to help a new product or process?
Yes, absolutely, and a substantial boost to our bottom line. A brand new product that has been licensed out throughout Europe and the Middle East has resulted from those collaborations. So it's been very, very powerful for us.
Good, and bottom line always helps, especially
as an
these
SME.
days. You mentioned actually there about patents and some of the arrangements that you might have with both academia, but particularly also with some of your businesses, may appear on paper quite complex because you may be redeploying existing technology in new ways or new markets. So how do you approach all those kind of maybe might be perceived as quite tricky conversations?
Our business is a very specialist one. We have interactions with companies all around the world. I see people from Kuwait, or with previous interactions with Kuwait, joining us here today. We have a variety of conversations and relationships with companies around the world. You have to take things on a very granular basis. We have to have those individual conversations. Licensing and intellectual property is always sometimes a thorny issue when you're into a new product development. I think we're very fortunate now that there are well-established frameworks for interaction with academics. There are, I think, 4 or 5, correct me if I'm wrong, types of framework agreements for intellectual property as to who will actually own the intellectual property at the end of collaboration. And that clear playing field is certainly encouraged a lot of SMEs to go down the academic collaboration route, which has been quite useful for us.
Yeah, on the last count, I think it was 15 standard legal templates that the universities have now, and that was just recently. They've updated that just about February time. So it's been, I suppose, great to get the business feedback on how creating standard legal templates ensures that they have similar type negotiations with all universities across Scotland. So it's not a case of having to start with a blank sheet of paper, which can sometimes be quite long approach.
Exactly, and it goes much towards the question of setting expectations very clearly at the outset. Much like in the technical development, it has to be very clear as to who's bringing what to the table, and at the end of the project, who will walk away with what from the collaboration.
Changing tack slightly, we've mentioned doing our business with Scottish Tourism here about being in the picturesque town of Kelso, but like Scott Mass, many companies are based in rural areas across Scotland that we help, but are trading globally. But sometimes there's a kind of challenge in terms of recruiting talent into more rural areas, and particularly attracting skills and people to kind of be innovative across the business. How have you found that being based in the south of Scotland?
It's ultimately a challenge. We do not benefit from having a steady stream of graduates on our doorstep, knocking on our doors. Very often we have to point people to a map and to point out where Kelso is. With that said, we enjoy a fantastic standard of living, and the great outdoors is fantastic, and many people move here and love it. One of the things that we've found very useful is actually the sandwich placement courses, where we bring students down. We provide them with accommodation for between 4 and 6 months, and they can enjoy and experience what it is to live and work within a rural area. A graduate entry salary goes a lot further in a rural area such as the Scottish Borders. And I think also our way of life and the increased, particularly as we've seen in the past 5 months, the increased ability to telework and to work remotely is of a huge advantage. It's not something that's, a lot of people have talked in the press about, the great rise of Teams and Zoom and so on, which leaves us maybe in this area a little bit bemused because this is something that we've been doing as a normal part of our business, working in all corners of the globe for the best part of the past 5 years. We were able to adapt to COVID relatively easily because it's just what we have to do to operate on the global platform located where we are.
And you've mentioned, Alistair, sandwich placement courses and graduate level apprenticeships and knowledge transfer partnerships. So quite a range of different ways of working and drawing in talent. And I assume that you have to kind of assess each of them on their merit, but they probably also give you a bit of a long interview process with potential employees.
Exactly. We have on average every year 2 or 3 graduate placement students with us. Invariably, one of them will end up joining us on a full-time basis later on that after graduation in that year. So it gives a fantastic opportunity to test drive not only the company, the technology, but the location. One of the other benefits that we've seen again with the rise of remote learning technologies, let's say, is that now we are working with Forth Valley College on upskilling 12 of our existing staff onto a modern apprenticeship scheme. So these are staff who have joined us mainly within the last year, and we're upskilling them on chemical process engineering, operator roles, quality assurance, and so on. And we're able to do that by bringing in assessors from specialist colleges and in workplace assessment, with the academic component being carried out entirely online using a training facility that we've built here on the site, which prevents us from having to go down the lines of day release and so on, which is a game changer both for us as a business, but also the individuals. Whereas roles that we really wouldn't normally be able to consider doing any form of certified vocational learning, we're now able to offer SVQ modules against most roles that we now have within the company.
That sounds like a fantastic development and particularly when you as a small business have been leading on that, but a great way of upskilling your current staff and probably a great model that other companies could follow.
Absolutely. I mean, we found, as part of our upskilling during the recent COVID events and even prior to that some of our best staff have come from industries such as catering. We have 2 chefs on our staff, fully qualified chefs who have joined us and are now leading the production of disinfectants. But the transferable skills that they've brought from this area over onto our industry have been fantastic, and I think it's right that we were able to recognise that by providing them formal upskilling vocational qualification opportunities. So you have to be creative.
Well, that's a great way. I hope your tea breaks come with lots of good catering.
Fantastic.
And I'm making us very envious, Alistair. Let's stick with kind of our discussion on south of Scotland. And in the past few years, there's been a real spotlight on the area, both Borders and Dumfries and Galloway. And I know that you're a member of the recently formed South of Scotland Enterprise Board. So do you want to kind of explain a little bit about what's going on in the region and what perhaps advice you might offer businesses in the region?
Sure. So South of Scotland Enterprise was set up on the 1st of April this year. Given the timing of COVID, it's been a very, very interesting time to set up a new economic development agency. People always say that when you have a startup business, the first thing to go out the window is your business plan. And it's unusual to throw out the business plan 2 weeks before you actually even start. But that was very much the situation that we were faced with. So South of Scotland Enterprise has been set up to provide the same regional focus to enterprise development agencies as has been enjoyed by the Highlands and Islands for the best part of the last 50 years. It's a recognition not of the fact that previous agencies have failed, but more the fact that things have to be done differently within a rural area. I still regard my business as being a small one with 50 odd employees. But actually, in reality, within the South of Scotland context, we're actually regarded as being a major local employer, whereas within the Central Belt, we would be a speck on the landscape. So the focus of South Scotland Enterprise is much more community-based than it would be elsewhere in Scotland, and we're there to provide enterprising, resilient communities and support to businesses of all size, be they community-led businesses, academic spin-outs, or entrepreneurial growing businesses. But we have a real focus on fair work and the contribution of that businesses make to the community, and I think that's probably what makes us stand out by comparison to the approach to enterprise development that's taken elsewhere in the country.
So very early days for the enterprise agency, but thank you for kind of explaining almost how it will operate very differently in that focus on communities, but quite I suppose a wide disparity in geographical areas across the borders in Dumfries. So quite a range of businesses that you anticipate will be able to avail of the support.
Indeed, the benchmark for support within the south of Scotland is very much if you have an idea, if you want to grow your entrepreneurial idea, be that within a community focus or as a private business or as a employee-owned cooperative, the door is very much open to you. There is no limitation on size of business or sectors or so on. We are actively involved in supporting retail businesses, tourism businesses, as well as those which would have historically attracted enterprise development agency support.
So great, exciting times ahead. But I suppose we've touched on it in a couple of the things you've said, Alistair. It's been extremely challenging for many businesses over the past few months. And whilst, you seem to have kind of flexed quite a lot, being used to remote working and adapted to many of the skills required. What has the last 6 months kind of, I suppose, meant for your business?
Long hours.
Upskilling.
Upscaling, yes. It's certainly been interesting times. We've seen areas of our business completely stop. So those involved in large capital projects went from being very, very intensive up until sort of the beginning of March to more or less a complete stop. We've had to be adaptable. Our staff have been fantastic in that, for many months I had fully qualified electricians and mechanical engineers bottling hand gel. But the flexibility that's been shown by our workforce has been huge. If I give you sort of rough figures, the disinfectants part of our business now within the last month is probably making around about 40% of our overall output. Prior to March, it was probably less than 5% of our business was in hand gels and disinfecting tablets. So there's been a huge shift in market requirements, a huge interest in what we do, and a recognition of the importance of hygiene in the operational of all types of businesses and the public sector. So we've had to make some very quick moves. Some of the sort of standout points I remember were sort of having a conversation as to whether we should charter half of a Boeing 767 to fly in bottles from China in order to meet market demands. And it's something that we did, and we were able to meet a fairly significant public sector requirement, but never in a million years did I think I would be chartering a plane to fly empty bottles. It's been crazy times. Things are now beginning to move back to, I hate the word, but this new normal thing that everybody keeps talking about. we've been fortunate enough that we have been able to do a lot of capital investment, but it has been around things that we've been looking to do anyway. So when things do return back to normal, or some types of normal, we should be very well placed with increased infrastructure, increased capacity, and the time that we have spent offline in some of the other parts of our business, we've been working very hard on some R&D projects. It's great to see the universities opening back up. Research campuses are now more or less fully up and running, and we're able to translate some of that work that we've been doing on paper for the past 4 months into some real projects to get going with again.
So some very rapid learning for you in terms of how to charter a flight and
Yep.
everything else in between. So that was as quite a kind of, I suppose, quite a rapid thing to actually have to boost production in such a quick time. And I suppose the markets don't see any sign of abating in terms of the need for disinfection and hand sanitizer, etc.
So the market always responds. Actually, in reality, the market for hand sanitizer is now pretty well served and saturated. We focus at Scott Mass on some fairly niche areas. So we don't and never have made alcohol hand gel. There are a number of technical reasons for that. We focus mainly on a longer lasting alternative. So our hand gel lasts on the hands for 8 hours. It doesn't dry the skin. So that's used in applications in the public services like the police, postal services, council workers, where you're not necessarily working in a medical environment where you can rely on the user to be sanitizing their hands between every interaction. So by focusing on those niche areas, by sort of leveraging the technologies, we're seeing a number of what we might call market trader type companies who are selling bucket loads of hand gel. That's not the area that we're into. We've done this for a number of years. We're in this for the long haul, and we're into areas where we add value. And some of the more difficult conversations that we've had internally have been around when to say no. It's very easy when you have somebody on the phone, wanting 10 tons of hand gel, and when can you make it, and I'll pay you whatever. And that's where you have to have the discipline. People talk about the entrepreneurial plan and sticking to your view of the market and not being distracted. It has been difficult on occasions not to get distracted and to start chasing short-term gains that could have been very well profitable, but in our case, we have stuck very much to our original business plan and adapted around that.
Sounds like really good advice, actually, Alistair, in terms of not losing sight of the overall mission of the business. But yes, I can imagine.
Time will tell.
Yes, yes. And you've kind of touched on it there, because there has been an awful lot, written and spoken about entrepreneurial mindset and adaptation and diversification over the past few months, and kind of being open to considering all possibilities, but then actually kind of sifting through them as to what will really make a difference. So, maybe kind of you'd like to perhaps give a little piece of advice on that, in terms of the businesses that are listening to us. What do you think makes a real difference in being entrepreneurial and innovative?
You have to be open. You have to be open to looking at the way the market is moving. But I think also it's very important not to get distracted by the short term. The test that we've always used is, what will this look like in 1 year, 18 months time? Despite my youthful good looks, I have been through, when I started out in the business in 2001, we went through foot and mouth disease, where everyone felt that the business of agriculture was going to change forever, and there was going to be a paradigm shift in the way that disinfect, the way that livestock were reared. Didn't happen. Went through 2008, the what was then regarded to this being a great economic crash. How little we knew. And again, in 2008, we were faced with the question of, did we make 25% of our staff redundant, or did we redeploy them onto an R&D project to take us to the next level? We chose the latter option, that ultimately took us into the larger end of the water disinfection market. In 2014, we were heavily involved in the oil and gas industry, and the oil and gas industry, particularly in the Middle East, suffered a massive price shock, and projects that we had just finished 2 weeks earlier suddenly were mothballed. So we've been around the block, we've seen economic cycles, we've seen how the market responds, and I think it's very, very important not to be distracted by what may happen in the short term as against your own particular vision of how things may look like in the future. And it's very easy to be blown away by hyperbole in the press, but yeah, you have to take a considered view.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I suppose, a challenge I spoke about in one of the kind of sessions I was on last week was how we balance the kind of positive stories and what businesses are doing versus actually what we see daily in the press, and how we can get some of the good news out there. Changing tack slightly, and this is a kind of flag to Jim Berryman, who I think is online, that maybe he wants to join the conversation here if Heather lets him in terms of explaining some of the funding that you've availed of. And I think you've had a kind of good track record of availing of funding from various different sources, be it Scottish Funding Council or Innovate UK, to offset the costs. So how has that helped you as a business? Has that been kind of one of the, I guess, ways of de-risking the programmes?
Yes, as it was put to me when I was asked to join the board of the shadow board of South of Scotland Enterprise 2 years ago, it was, well, you're one of our best customers, therefore, would you like to come and work on the other side of the table? I think it is true as a bootstrapped, family-owned enterprise. We don't have any private equity investors. Everything that we have done has been by reinvestment of revenues and so on. We have sought the assistance of the public sector throughout, and that drives our philosophy of trying to give back to particularly the local community wherever we can through CSR initiatives and training. I think it's only right to reflect the support that we've received over the past 20 years back into what we do in the community. But in terms of the journey, the enterprise development agencies still offer innovation grants, innovation funding. So Scottish Enterprise have a specialised innovation team, which are accessible to provide advice for account managed companies some funding. You have an innovation voucher scheme that's run from via interface and access via interface. Further innovation vouchers, which are still available, and then scaling up to that which was provided by Innovate UK, KTPs, and other specific calls that are made by Innovate UK to respond to particular challenges. So one of the more recent calls has been around coronavirus response. ScotMass were one of a number of Scottish companies who were successful in receiving funding, and in our case it was the development of a replacement for liquid bleach to be used in the domestic environment, so a tablet form of a disinfectant that can be used around the home but can be safely made up. It means that shipping costs are reduced, and it's a dilute at home type of disinfectant. So there are a number of different avenues that can be used to access funding. The starting point, I would always suggest to any businesses, would be a call to interface, because interface are probably as best aware of any organisation of what actually is out there. There is an absolutely mind-boggling map called the Dowling Review that shows the types of innovation funding that are out there for businesses. Sometimes that needs a steady, independent guiding hand or an advocate to actually point businesses in the right direction. I think that's a role that Interface have been fantastic at providing over the past 10, 15 years.
And thank you for that. Always great to receive testimonials. I think Jim has a question for us. So Heather, do you want Jim to pose it directly to Alistair, or you can be the spokesperson?
Yeah, I think at this stage I'll have to be the spokesperson for that. So thanks for posting your question, Jim. Alistair, have you got any emerging plans for collaborating? Jim would be very keen to visit Kelso again if you do.
So I think full disclosure, Jim was our KTP manager, I guess, on a project that we ran 3 or 4 years ago. So yes, indeed, Jim, we do. We're currently running a further innovation voucher supported project with RGU, and we are very hopeful that will move to another KTP in the fairly near future. And it's a fairly exciting project. So, we use these types of initial interactions as our stepping stone. A KTP is quite a commitment on both sides to get into. So some of these other funding mechanisms that are out there are great for us to be able to dip the toe in the water, test drive the academic, test drive, whether the project actually has legs, and then we're able to engage in the 2-year commitment around a KTP. So we're very hopeful of this project and looking forward to progressing it.
I think that's an open invitation, Jim, to come along to Kelso in a couple of months' time, and you might even get a good cup of tea and some catering.
Welcome anytime. Our chefs are at your service.
So, Alistair, you've been very generous with your time, and I know that there's probably quite a lot of demands on your busy day. So, maybe in summation and kind of summing up, do you have any one last piece of advice for businesses, even around collaborating or getting through the next 6 months? What would be your one piece of advice?
I think there's a number of businesses and indeed individuals out there who will have had 5 or 6 months to consider the world and consider what they want to be doing in it within the next 5 years. And I speak to a number of people in business that are looking, as a result of what's happened, to change direction. The help is out there. I think a lot of businesses will have to innovate to survive. And I think interfacing with other agencies, be those the enterprise agencies or interfacing with other academia, are there to help and pick up the phone.
Yes, indeed. Pick up the phone. Well, thank you so much, Alistair, for sharing your story with us in our fireside chat. And it's been a real privilege to hear, about you and the family and the business. And thank you so much. And we really look forward to hearing of your further developments in the coming months. I think it's one to watch, as they say, as you evolve into lots of different areas. But best of luck to you and all the team at Scott Mass. And thank you. Heather, some final words from you?
Yeah, just a big thank you again. Just kind of following on from your comment, Siobhán. Just it's been great to hear of, I guess, your journey, Alistair, and all the advice that you've been given across all the different areas and themes that have been brought up. So hopefully there's some good takeaways from those that have joined us today. And as I said, this will be going online afterwards, so we'll be able to definitely kind of continue to promote those pieces of advice that you've given, and hopefully it'll give some inspiration and some ideas for working towards the future, and I guess helping businesses to innovate and grow. So thank you very much to Alistair, and thank you as well, Siobhán. And we'll end today's session. So thank you everyone for attending as well.